wars, royal flattery, and epic translation fails. America's states didn't get their names by chance. Every one has a backstory, some noble, some quirky, and some downright bizarre. On today's episode of the Infographic Show, we take a look at how every state got its name. Number 50. Nevada. You might not think it by looking at the endless dusty deserts and canyons that make up the state, but the name means snow-covered because it comes from the bordering Sierra Nevada mountain range, which translates to snowy mountains. Unsurprisingly to locals, as contrary to its desert reputation, Nevada has the most named mountain ranges of any state. That's right, Nevada is full of mountains. Fun fact, you can tell if someone is truly a Nevadan just by how they say the state's name. Locals stress the VAD in Nevada, meanwhile out-of-staters go for the VA. Nevadans, they won't hold it against you if you slip up though, unlike some other states. Number 49. Arkansas. It's pronounced Arkansas, not Arkansas. But why? The name was inspired by the Quapaw tribe in the area. The tribe was called Arcana, or Arkansas, or Arkansas, depending on who you're asking. The word translated to south wind or downstream people. The French used a local tribe as their guides, and their unique accent gave us the unusual pronunciation of Arkansas. In the 1800s, one senator actually tried to make it sound more English, Arkansas, but by then everyone was already saying Arkansas, so the state passed a resolution making that the official pronunciation. So the word and pronunciation of Arkansas is the result of the longest, weirdest game of telephone ever. Otherwise, it might be pronounced like Number 48. Kansas. Kansas and Arkansas are actually related when it comes to word origin. In fact, Kansas basically means the same thing. The state was named for the Kansas or Kansa tribe of the Sioux family that lived on the banks of a local river. It also means south wind people, so why the slight difference in name? In the Algonquin languages, the A prefix is for ethnic groups. Add to that the difference in pronunciations by the French speakers in one area and English speakers in another, and the two state names diverged. The French also confused another state name. Number 47. Illinois. Illinois may be named after a Native American tribe in the area way back when, the Illinois. To the French, the tribe's name sounded like Illinois, which they wrote down as Illinois. Some believe the original word as Irenwiwa, which means speaking in an ordinary way. Another theory is that it comes from the native word for warrior, Illini, combined with the French wa. When Congress adopted the name in 1818, they kept the French spelling but ditched the pronunciation. Instead of Illinois, they went with Illinois, even though that's not really English either, and it's not even the worst mix-up caused by French and English confusion. Number 46. Maine. People disagreed so intensely on the origin of Maine's name that the local lawmakers had to get involved to settle it once and for all. The disagreement was, yet again, whether the name comes from the French or the English. Some thought it was an English calling the land Maine to distinguish it from the many islands off of the coast, over 4,600. Others believed it was named after a French province, also called Maine. In 2001, the Maine legislature decided to end the debate, saying yes, Maine was named after the French location. But French wasn't the only foreign language to get involved in U.S. states. Number 45. Montana. If you got anything above a D in high school Spanish, you might think that you know this one already. Montana comes from the Spanish word for mountain, because the Rocky Mountains cut right through Montana. But it wouldn't be a state name if there weren't some controversy about its origin. Because while Ohio Representative James Ashley said the word was Spanish in 1864, just a couple of weeks later his colleague disagreed with him. Michigan Senator Jacob Howard said that the name actually comes from the Latin word montana, which proves that languages may evolve and change, but political bickering is forever. Speaking of bickering, number 44. New York. In 1624, New York was settled by the Dutch first. They called it New Amsterdam. When the British took it over in 1664, they obviously didn't want to stick with that name. So they named it New York after the Duke of York, who technically owned it. His brother, King Charles II, you'll hear that name a lot, had given him the land. But in 1673, the Dutch briefly took it back and renamed it New Orange. A year later, they handed it over to the British again and it went right back to being New York. The rest of New Netherland, well, that got folded in and took the name New York too. Meanwhile, the Native Americans who had survived smallpox tried in vain to pick a side, not realizing yet that no matter who won, they would be losing. At least we know why New York is called that, unlike number 43, Tennessee. No one knows what Tennessee means. Spanish explorer Captain Juan Pardo recorded the name in 1567 after he found a Native American village called Tenasqui. Dozens of spelling attempts later include Tanasi, Tennessee, and the governor of South Carolina finally just called it Tennessee in a 1750s letter, and that name stuck. Another fun fact about the area, part of Tennessee, along with Kentucky, was almost a separate state called Transylvania. But the plan failed because Virginia and North Carolina claimed the land instead. Speaking of North Carolina and states that successfully split up their land. Number 42. North Carolina. King Charles II gave out a land grant to Sir Robert Heath for North Carolina and South Carolina because the two areas used to be one Carolina until 1712. The grants were basically a royal thank you from King Charles, rewarding his biggest supporters from the English Civil War against Oliver Cromwell. So the state was named after his original Latin name, Carolus. The strange part? French settlers had already made their mark in the area in the 16th century and also called the region Caroline, after their king, King Charles IX. The age of exploration was a very uncreative time for monarchs. But why did the two states split up? Number 41. South Carolina. North and South Carolina ended up being very different in terms of geography, economy, and population. First, the Carolina region was just too big and too difficult to navigate, making it hard to manage. So as early as 1691, a deputy governor was appointed for the north part of the region. Major cities like Charlestown, now Charleston, Cape Fear, and Albemarle were too far apart to maintain good connections, leading to the two areas drifting further apart. And North Carolina just wasn't growing as fast financially as South Carolina. Part of the problem was the very tricky northern coastline that made trade and shipping difficult. The other issue was the rocky soil, not so great for farming, which meant smaller farms and lower profits than the South. So South Carolina boomed in population compared to the North. In 1712, each went their own way, but that rivalry was nothing compared to the next one. Number 40. North Dakota. Dakota was the name of a Sioux tribe in the area. Their title translates to friend or allies, which is ironic when you learn the story of why North and South Dakota split up in the first place. The Dakota Territory, formed in 1861, included not only North and South Dakota but also Montana and Wyoming. In 1889, the Dakotas were admitted into the Union as official states, that same year that North and South Dakota officially split apart. Why? Incompatibility. Irreconcilable differences. North and South Dakota actually had a lot of beef. As history professor Kimberly Porter says, the South half did not like the North half. Number 39. South Dakota. Southern Dakota thought Northern Dakota was just too much controlled by the wild folks, cattle ranchers, and fur traders. They stopped short of calling them unruly low-life hordes. South Dakota had over twice the population of the North Side, 98,000 versus 37,000 in 1880. South Dakota had enough people to become a state and desperately wanted to. But the federal government said that either the Dakotas had to enter as one big state or South Dakota had to wait until North Dakota had enough people. Well, that led to even more resentment. When the North eventually got populated enough, South Dakota petitioned to join the Union, as Dakota let the North figure out another name. But neither side wanted to give up Dakota because it was associated with quality agricultural products. In 1889, President Benjamin Harrison put an end to the dispute once and for all by admitting both as separate states, North Dakota and South Dakota. Let's look for some real friendship instead. Number 38. Texas. Texas comes from the word Tasha, which means either friends or hello friend. It was a word used by the Caddo tribe. Spanish settlers in the 16th century used this word to talk about the tribes since they were relatively friendly to newcomers, but they Hispanicized it to Tejas, and English speakers later anglicized it to Texas. This origin might explain why Texas's motto is friendship. Other states are named after local tribes with less impressive name meanings. Number 37. Alabama. Europeans named the state after a nearby river, the Alabama, which itself came from the name of a local tribe. For years, people thought that Alabama meant "here we rest," which sounds, well, kind of dark. But in Choctaw, it actually means thicket clearers. Alba means vegetation, and amo means to gather. And since local tribe members had cleared a lot of the land to grow vegetables, this would make sense, but we have no idea what the next tribe was doing to get their name. Number 36. Iowa. Iowa was named after a local tribe called Ayukswa, spelled Ioways in English. The word meant sleepy or one who puts to sleep, which many would argue is exactly what driving through Iowa's endless, flat cornfields does to you. The first time Iowa pops up in a book is by Lieutenant Albert M. Lee, published in 1836. He'd come across the term a year earlier while on a mission in the area. But in a surprise twist, it seems the local tribe didn't actually call themselves that after all. They called themselves Baksoje, which means ashy snow. Iowa might have been the Dakota name for the tribe. Did they mean it as a diss? We will never know. It's definitely not as straightforward as… Number 35. Indiana. Indiana literally means land of the Indians, probably because the land was purchased from Native Americans along the Ohio River. This was swiftly followed up by the Indian Removal Act of 1830, which forced any remaining tribes in the area to move west. Kinda strange to name a place after the people you eventually kicked out of it. Originally, Indiana was much bigger. It was part of the Northwest Territory designated in 1787, before being split off into Indiana Territory in 1800. This territory included most of Illinois, Wisconsin, Indiana, Michigan, and a sliver of East Minnesota. Then in 1816, present-day Indiana was finally made a state. Other states remained huge, something reflected in their name. Number 34. Alaska. People believed the word Alaska comes from the Aleut word Alieksa, which translates to Great Land. Considering Alaska's sheer size, over 665,000 square miles, it makes sense. You could fit California, Texas, and Montana inside it, all at once. But the Aleut word is up to interpretation. Others who spell it Alexok say it means the mainland or a peninsula. Why can't the Aleuts just clear this up? Well, the disagreement over the translation of Alexok comes from how specific it is. It literally means the object toward which the action of the sea is directed. And there is just no single English word for that. You think that's long? Well, wait until you hear the meaning of… Number 33. Connecticut. The state's name, like many others, comes from one of its major rivers, in this case, the Connecticut River, or according to the local Mohicans in the 1600s, Kinnetukut, or the Connecticut River. Honestly, it seems like the settlers were just writing down their best educated guess at what they were hearing. It either means long tidal river, upon the long tidal river, or river whose water is driven in waves by tides, which are all very specific things to have a single word for. And big bodies of water is a very popular origin story for state names. Number 32. Mississippi. Mississippi was the name of the mighty river before it became the name of the land surrounding it. After all, rivers were very important as water sources and trading routes back then. Native American communities referred to the Mississippi as exactly that, calling it Mississippi, meaning big water or great water or father of waters, depending on how poetic the translator happens to feel. Similar to… Number 31. Michigan. It's no wonder that Michigan, surrounded by 4 of the 5 Great Lakes, was named after them. The state name comes from the Ojibwa or Chippewa word Michigama, which translates to great or large lake. The word comes from the Algonquin language, a dialect of which the Ojibwe spoke. European explorers first used that name for Lake Michigan in 1679. After a while, they decided to just give the whole state that name as well. Some Native American meanings have carried on in the state's current nickname. Number 30. Minnesota. Minnesota is known as the land of 10,000 lakes, even though the state actually has over 11,000. And its name comes from the Dakota words for water and clouds, ni and sota, respectively. Historians disagree on whether they called the land that. Was it because the water was so clear that it reflected the clouds, or because the water itself was cloudy? Either way, the word origin of Minnesota's name is clear. Unlike… Number 29. Missouri. Though Missouri comes from a Sioux word, Owe Masurita, historians disagree on what exactly it means. Most people interpret it as muddy water, but the Smithsonian Institution Bureau of American Ethnology thinks otherwise. They believe the Sioux word meant town of the large canoes, because the miss likely means big, the same way it does in the name for Mississippi. Still, others believe that it means dugout canoe or log canoe. This confusion doesn't happen as often when the states are named after people. Number 28. Delaware. Explorer Samuel Argall was sailing north from Virginia in 1610 when he spotted present-day Cape Henlopen and named it Cape de la Loire to pay tribute to Virginia Governor Thomas West, which might not make much sense until you find out that he was also the 12th Baron de la Loire. The title is Old French for of the war. When West arrived in Jamestown in 1610, he saved the colony from collapse with supplies and reinforcements. Weirdly, he only lived in Virginia until 1611. Ill health forced him to return to England, but not before he had instituted a strict military regime and started a brutal campaign against local Native Americans. He tried to come back in 1618, but he died on the way. So West left a very different legacy depending on who you asked. But Delaware still bears his name thanks to Argall honoring him. Sometimes explorers wanted a reminder of home instead. Number 27, New Hampshire. Sometimes European settlers didn't want to come up with something completely new. So, New Hampshire was named after Hampshire County back in jolly old England. That's because Captain John Mason, the man who got a land grant to settle it in 1623, was from Hampshire. However, Mason would never see his new home. Before he could even make the trip, he died in 1635. A recurring theme with transatlantic voyages and general health of the time seems like the 1600s were a bad time survival-wise. As for states named for England, well, we have one more. Number 26, New Jersey. The land of New Jersey was originally given to Sir George Carteret and Lord Berkeley by the Duke of York. And your parents couldn't even give you a PlayStation for Christmas. Sir Carteret was from Jersey, an island in the English Channel, and he wanted to bring a little bit of home with him by naming the land. He also ended up being lieutenant governor of the island, so a pretty important guy, which tracks because a duke gifted a colony to him. But where does Jersey come from? Historians say it's either a horrible mispronunciation of the Roman name of the island, Caesarea, or a Viking name. E meant island in Old Norse, so Jersey could have been Gers Island. Just like the next state was named after one man. Number 25, Pennsylvania. King Charles II, there he goes again, gave this area to William Penn in 1681. Penn was a Quaker and he wanted the right to settle there and establish a peaceful Quaker community. Since King Charles II left a blank under name, Penn decided to name it Pennsylvania. Not after himself, after his father, an admiral. Or maybe himself and he just used the father thing as an excuse. The Sylvania part comes from the wide expanse of forests that cover the land. Sylvan means wooded, and ia means state of, so Pennsylvania is the state of Penn's Woods, as opposed to today where it's mostly just a state of enthusiastic sports fans and cheesesteak. Others who were sent overseas to set up the states wanted to employ a little more brown-nosing in their naming strategy. Number 24, Georgia. Georgia got its name from King George. No, not that King George, the one the colonies fought a revolution against. The previous one, King George II. King George II granted the royal charter for the last of the 13 colonies in 1732 to General James Oglethorpe, and he decided he at least wanted one named after him. The suffix ia means state of. The colony was set up as a refuge for English debtors, the deserving poor, who would be sent there to try to regain their financial footing. Oglethorpe was moved to help this population after a friend of his died in debtor's prison. More practically, it was also a good buffer state between English colonies and Spanish Florida, which was probably what King George II was more interested in. Other states named after royals include number 23, Maryland. The royal who gave Maryland her name was Queen Henrietta Maria, Queen Mary, husband of King Charles. The king gave Lord Baltimore a charter in 1632 to establish Maryland in the first place. No one is sure if the king requested it or Lord Baltimore thought it would be good to flatter the man who just handed him a whole territory. We do, however, know that Lord Baltimore originally wanted to name the area Crescentia, land of growth or increase. Maryland is also famous for being only one of two states named after a woman. But before we get to that, let's look at what French royalty left behind, name-wise. Number 22, Louisiana. Another state named after a king. Louisiana was named in honor of the French king, King Louis XIV. Explorer René Robert Cavelier Sieur de la Salle gave the territory the name La Louisiana in 1683, which translated to Land of Louis. It was originally the name of the entire Louisiana territory, which covered most of the Midwest, until states and territories broke off one by one, leaving hot, humid Louisiana by the Gulf. Now back to the women. Number 21, Virginia. Virginia is famous as the first colony. It's also the first colony named for a woman. The state was named after Queen Elizabeth I of England, not after her given name but rather her nickname, the Virgin Queen. It was this queen who gave Sir Walter Raleigh permission to colonize the place in 1584, after which he coincidentally suggested he should name it after her. Whether Queen Elizabeth really was a virgin is doubtful. Most historians say no, but she never married, claiming she was married to England instead. So Virginia it was, until it wasn't, at least not fully. Number 20, West Virginia. This other virgin-named state was part of Virginia until the Civil War. Resentment had built up over the years. The state's western counties felt ignored and overlooked by their richer, more populated eastern counterparts. When the Civil War started and Virginia seceded, West Virginia had had enough. They wanted to remain in the Union, so they formed their own state, which became a part of the U.S., or what remained of it at the time, on June 20, 1863. They considered other names like Kanawha or Allegheny after local rivers, but locals still thought of themselves as Virginians, even though they disagreed with their fellow statesmen, so they decided on West Virginia. Not every state named after a leader was about royalty, though. Number 19. Washington. Washington State, much like Washington, D.C., is named after the country's first president, George Washington. In fact, it is the only state named after a president. But D.C. is actually the reason it wasn't named something else instead, because D.C. stands for District of Columbia. And at the time, Columbia was a female personification of the U.S., named after Christopher Columbus. The settlers up north wanted to call their new territory Columbia too, after the Columbia River. But Congress said, too confusing. Since D.C. already had the name, they went with Washington instead. And you don't know confusing until you get to number 18, Kentucky. If you haven't caught on yet, people were really and are really bad at translating Native American languages. Or there's just no easy direct translations to English. Either way, it makes most state name origins a guessing game. Kentucky may have one of the most contested name origins of all states. There are a few possible meanings, all from different Native American languages in the region. Meadowland, Kentucky, Land of Tomorrow, Kintatan, and Dark and Bloody Ground, Kentucky. Another possible interpretation, River of Blood. You can see why Kentucky didn't pick that as the state motto. We're going to go with origin name unknown, as is number 17, Arizona. No one knows what's up with Arizona. We mean the name as well. Historians still disagree over what Arizona means and even which language it comes from. Theory 1, the word comes from the Papago tribal language and means place of the young spring or place of the little spring. Theory 2, others believe it comes from a Basque word meaning good oak tree, as the Spanish were the first Europeans to set up outposts there. Theory 3, some historians believe it may come from the Aztec word Arizuma, which means silver-bearing, since silver was discovered in the state. While the Aztecs never settled the area, they did have a long-term trading relationship with the local tribes. At the end of the day, no one can agree, so take your pick. At least it doesn't have a non-PC name like number 16, Oklahoma. Oklahoma's name comes from the local Choctaw language, a tribe that is still in the area today, as the Choctaw Nation covers over 11,000 square miles in southeastern Oklahoma. The name was given by Choctaw chief Keliahote in 1865, who later became known as Allen Wright, a real step down in the cool name category. It comes from Oklahoma, a combination of two words that mean people, Okla, and red, Huma. Choctaw people used it to describe the skin color of their race as a whole, but just a couple of years ago in 2023, a Choctaw newspaper gave an alternate explanation, that Homa was a title given to those who didn't retreat, so Oklahoma would mean people who don't retreat. Another name with alternate explanations is number 15, Wisconsin. The Native American name for the river that runs through the state was originally Mesconsing. French missionary Jacques Marquette wrote it down as Mescausing. Another French explorer after him heard Wisconsin instead. When the area became a U.S. territory in 1836 and a state in 1848, English-speaking settlers called it Wisconsin, based on what the native name sounded like to them. Over time, many interpretations have surfaced, but the Wisconsin Historical Society agrees it means this stream meanders through something red, referring to the red bluffs along the Wisconsin River. State namers really like the color red apparently because number 14, Colorado. Spanish explorers named a major river they found in the area Colorado, meaning colored red. Due to the local soil, the Colorado does look red and muddy at times. In 1861, when the area became a territory, Congress took the name of the river and said, yeah, that works, and just gave it to the land. Because it was 1861 and they were dealing with more pressing problems, like half of the country seceding. When Colorado became a state in 1876, the name stuck. And this isn't even the last time it crops up on the list. Settlers were obsessed with it like they were obsessed with water and mountains. Number 13, Utah. Another name that was mispronounced over the years until arriving at its present-day form. The local tribes in the region were called the Ute, but the Spanish pronounced it as the Utah. People believe it means people of the mountains, but no one's 100% sure. Regardless, in 1850, when Utah became a territory, the U.S. took the name and ran with it, as it did with number 12, Vermont. The word Vermont comes from French. Samuel de Champlain, a French explorer who later gave a lake his name, recorded the name on a map in 1632. It was part of New France then. Verd means green and Mont means mountain. There is a mountain range in Vermont that still has the name Green Mountains today. For the French speakers furiously scrolling through the comments to say that is not what green is in French, it may not be now, but it was back then. Vert, vers, and verd were used interchangeably until 1847. But after the French and Indian War, the British won the land in 1763. They anglicized the spelling to Vermont and officially put this name in the state's constitution in 1777. The states that didn't have mountains had to settle for hill names. Number 11. Massachusetts. The local Massachusetts tribe had a name that roughly translated to on or about the Green Hill, a fitting name for a state known for green rolling hills. Even the historical nickname for Massachusetts' most populous city, Boston, was City on a Hill. It was first recorded all the way back in 1614 by Captain John Smith. Yes, that Captain John Smith, made famous in historical writings and Disney's Pocahontas. In fact, he also gave New England its name. At least the state wasn't named after a natural feature drowning in quicksand, unlike number 10, Nebraska. Nebraska's name comes from the Sioux word Nebraska or Nebraska, which means flat water. It was the original name of the Platte River because it's wide and seemingly smooth in appearance. But the Platte is deceptive. Early settlers were frustrated by its absolute uselessness for navigation. Constantly shifting sandbars and currents made navigating it without running aground impossible. And if you're just trying to wade across or swim through, watch out for the quicksand. It turns out it's not just a danger in old-timey cartoons. It's very real. As for a state named after a more useful body of water, number 9, Ohio. The state was named after the Ohio River, which in turn is named after an Iroquois word meaning good river or beautiful river, Oyo or Ohio, depending on who you ask. If at this point you are wondering if everyone back then was just obsessed with rivers, the answer is yes. To be fair, they traded off, farmed off, and survived off of them back then, so rivers were pretty important. Even today, the Ohio River supplies 5 million people with drinking water, still pretty important. At least they didn't completely make up a name like number 8, Idaho. High schoolers have been making jokes about Idaho's name for decades, and they should, because many people think Idaho is just completely made up. A mining lobbyist once claimed Idaho was a native word meaning gem of the mountains, and it fit perfectly. Idaho's nickname is the Gem State because of its many rare stones. Well, it definitely sounds better than the Potato State. But just 10 years later, a news article came out saying that an eccentric man named George Willing just made it up. Originally, Idaho was meant to name the entire territory, including what is now Colorado, but Congress thought it sounded too random, so they went with Colorado instead. When Idaho eventually split off into its own territory, the name was conveniently sitting there waiting to be used. The next state's name wasn't made up, but it could mean almost anything. Number 7, Oregon. Here's what Oregon could mean: oregano, big-eared men, or gently falling waters. Let's explain. The first use of the word is in a 1765 funding proposal by Robert Rogers to find the Northwest Passage. He writes that he will follow a river called Oregon by the Native Americans. No one knows where he heard that term or what river he's even talking about. But here are the theories. 1, it comes from the Spanish word oregano, after the indigenous wild sage of the state. 2, it comes from the Spanish oregones, a term which referred to the local tribes and meant big-eared men. 3rd, it comes from the alura agua, and it means gently falling waters. Rogers didn't find the passage anyway, just like the man who named the next state missed what he was looking for. Number 6, Florida. No, the state is not named after briefly popular hip-hop artist Flo Rida. Shocking, we know. Juan Ponce de Leon landed in Florida in 1513 around Easter Sunday. He saw wildflowers blooming everywhere, so he named it Pascua de Flores in Spanish, or Flowery Easter. De Leon was looking for the Fountain of Youth, but he never found it. Perhaps his quest is carried on by older people all over the land who have moved down to the Sunshine State. We don't know if they're looking for youth, but it has made Florida the state with the most retirement communities in the U.S. Yet another state name comes from a non-Christian religion. Number 5. New Mexico. The Spanish were actually using the term New Mexico all the way back in the 16th century for any lands north of the Rio Grande. When the state went to the U.S. after the Mexican-American War, the U.S. just kept it. But what does Mexico mean? The country was named after an Aztec god called Mexitli. He was incredibly important to the Aztec mythology. A legendary feared leader, war priest, and military commander who led the Aztecs to their capital of Tenochtitlan. And still, not the only god a state has been named after. Number 4. Hawaii. These islands were almost named the Sandwich Islands as a tribute to the Earl of Sandwich. Or they would have been, if Captain James Cook got his way when he set foot there in 1778. The problem? Captain Cook didn't discover the islands so much as he just landed in a place where a society already existed. And the locals, who did not know who or what the Earl of Sandwich was, were not a fan of the name. King Kamehameha I eventually united the islands under him by 1810, under the name Kingdom of Hawaii. Some believe that it means homeland, from a combination of Hawa, homeland, and Ai, small and raging. Others believe it was a tribute to Hawaiiloa, a legendary Polynesian fisherman and navigator who supposedly discovered the islands. At least the state didn't get some random name like Number 3. Rhode Island. Rhode Island may get its name from an island in Greece. Explorer Giovanni de Verrazzano wrote down the name in a 1524 letter, describing an island near Narragansett Bay. To him it looked like the island of Rhodes, except for, the columns and the beaches and the mild, sunny weather, we guess. But historians think there might be another explanation. Dutch navigator Adrian Block called it Rode Eiland, a reference to the red clay along the shore. And because Dutch is almost impossible for non-native speakers to pronounce, it was then anglicized to Rhode Island. Speaking of states named after random places. Number 2. Wyoming. The Ohio congressman who came up with the name, James M. Ashley, later wondered if he should have proposed the territory at all. The land was dry, harsh, and hard to settle, but he still loved the name he'd created, which actually came from a valley in Pennsylvania. An 1809 poem called Gertrude of Wyoming made the valley famous, with a beautiful description of it. Since Ashley was Pennsylvania born, he proposed this pretty name for the new territory. What is still uncertain is exactly what Wyoming means. One explanation is the Muncie, Delaware word Chiwewamink, meaning at the big river flat. It could also come from Magwawama, a Delaware word that means large plains. At least Wyoming was named after a place that was real, unlike Number 1. California. California was named after a mythical island. In a book, specifically a Spanish bestseller named Las Sergas de Esplandan, published in 1510 by Garci Rodriguez de Montalvo. In de Montalvo's book, California is an Eden-like island populated by black women warriors who ride mythical griffins around a lush land filled with precious gems and gold. Sounds cool. When Cortez landed in California in 1535, he thought it was an island and named it that. Why? Well, because Cortez and Jimenez weren't even in the present-day state of California. They were in Baja California, a long, thin peninsula that could easily be mistaken for an island if you land at its southern end. But maybe Cortez was a bit psychic, because hundreds of years later, gold would be found in California, starting the frenzied gold rush of the mid-19th century. Now you know how every state got its name. But what if the map of America looked completely different? Watch USA Today if the South won the Civil War to see how history could have changed everything. Or click on this video instead.